It's officially February, which means Valentine's Day is right around the corner. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to recommend some horror romance films. I've decided to recommend 10 in this video, and I'm also doing another video which is 10 anti-Valentine's Day horror films. So depending on how you feel, you may want to watch something that is more romance focused or something that is kind of anti-romance focused. These will all be horror films or films with horror elements. First up, we have Bones and All. In Bones and All, we follow a girl who is struggling to fit in and ends up on the run after something goes wrong at a sleepover. On her travels, she ends up finding a boy who is very similar to her, so it isn't long before they grow very attached to each other. They end up getting themselves into some trouble that they can't run from forever. I saw this one at the cinema and I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, and it was an emotional roller coaster. It was so much better than I had anticipated. It is quite slow paced, but it does work well for this film. There are bits and pieces of action between slower scenes. We spend a lot of time with the characters. We get really attached to them and their story, especially their love story, so we just feel everything alongside them. The gore and implied gore is quite heavy on this one. It is one of the main themes of the film. Bones and All makes you feel very uncomfortable at times. There are some hard scenes to watch and there are some quite dark and disturbing themes. This isn't a film to go into lightly, but if you really pay attention, then the story really does pay off. Next up, we have Lisa Frankenstein. A lonely outcast girl accidentally reanimates a corpse of a young man while she's hanging out at the graveyard. He ends up causing them some trouble and getting them into all sorts of situations. This film has a really cool 80s vibe with all the outfits and the setting. It's such a nice film to look at. This did come out last year around Valentine's Day actually. I absolutely love the cast. They are all perfect for their roles. Catherine Newton plays such a good weird girl and I absolutely love her outfits and her makeup in this. Cole Sprouse was equally as amazing in his role. He didn't actually have any dialogue. He just made a lot of strange monster noises. His acting in this role relied a lot on his movement and gestures, which must have been really quite difficult as an actor who is so used to rehearsing lines and where dialogue is so important to so many roles. We really see what he can pull off without any dialogue, so that performance was really impressive. This is a comedy horror romance. It is one that is more light-hearted. I probably would also put this in the category of like a teen horror film. Lisa Frankenstein was written by the same person who wrote Jennifer's Body, so if you enjoyed that film, then I think you will enjoy this too, because you can definitely see similarities between the films. The writer did say they are actually both set in the same fictional universe. Next on the list, we have Your Monster. Your Monster follows a woman who is struggling. She is going through so much in her life, and then suddenly on top of it all, she finds out that a monster is living in her apartment alongside her. They have to decide whether they can live together or if they're going to have to go their separate ways. This stars Melissa Barrera. She is absolutely amazing in this role. She is great in the horror genre in general. Although this isn't a straight up horror film, this is very, very genre bending. This is more of a comedy, romance, fantasy film with horror elements. The horror elements aren't too much, so I would say this is more of a spooky film than a horror film. The storyline is sweet, although there are some sad moments and themes. The comedic script definitely makes it less heavy and more lighthearted. Next, we have a film called Villains. In Villains, we follow a amateur criminal couple who break and attempt to rob a large house. But whilst trying to complete this mission, they are met with some unexpected and shocking obstacles. This is another horror comedy, and this one has two incredible leads with Micah Monroe and Bill Skarsgård. I would say both of these have become horror icons in the last decade. They are both incredible in horror films. This is one with twists and turns, and it would definitely keep you on your toes. It isn't the best or the strongest film, but it is enjoyable and quite underrated, so it's definitely worth the watch if you're in the mood for a darker comedy. Next up, we have Love Lies Bleeding. Gym manager Lou falls for Jackie, a bodybuilder that is new to her gym. Jackie isn't in town for long with dreams of traveling to Las Vegas. Things begin to spiral with Lou's criminal family and Jackie's determination to not let anything stand in the way of her dreams. The acting is so strong in this film. Both of the main leads are incredible. The story is really unique, especially towards the end. I really appreciated the creativity that went into this story. It is a slow burn, but the characters are so interesting that even at a slower pace, it's enjoyable getting to know them and their complexities. I would say this film is more of a crime thriller with horror elements. It is very violent and gory. We definitely have some body horror as well, and some other really unexpected moments where the film really starts to bend the genre, but I will let you discover that for yourself. This was directed by Rose Glass. She also directed Saint Maud. These are both A24 films. Next up we have Warm Bodies. In a dystopian universe, a plague caused half of humanity to become zombies. A zombie called R starts to feel some of his human instincts come back when seeing and saving a human girl from the horde. This film came out in 2013, so not long after the Twilight saga wrapped up, so this was definitely a great time for it to be released. It does have similarities to films like Twilight, and of course we had some really popular zombie comedy films that came out before this one with Zombieland and Shaun of the Dead. You could definitely see the films that inspired this one, but it is unique in its own way, with combining romance and zombies, and being one of the first films that I can remember to have a reverse transformation. The CGI does make this film extra cheesy watching it nowadays. It's crazy how much CGI and special effects has evolved even just in the last 10 years. But I would still recommend this one because it is entertaining and wholesome. Next up, of course, I had to include Bride of Chucky. Chucky and Tiffany set out on an adventure to find an amulet so that they can gain back their human forms. This is definitely the most campy entry to the Child's Play franchise. It's really cool to see more dolls than just Chucky causing mayhem, which is also why I love Seed of Chucky. This is a late 90s film, but it does feel very 2000s. It's so wacky and there is so much going on in this film. As the films go on, they end up being so different and straying so afar from the first entry. Like, the first entry in the Child's Play franchise is nothing like this. As the films go on, Chucky's personality really comes out and they just end up being over the top bonkers slasher films. At number 8 we have Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person. I don't know why the title is so long for this one. A young vampire girl does not have it in her to kill, yet she needs blood to survive, and her family insists she must grow up and learn to harvest her own blood. She meets a young suicidal boy who offers himself up for her. She is set on making sure his dying wishes come true before he sacrifices himself. This is a really fun and different take on a vampire film because we follow a vampire who wishes that she didn't have to do what she has to do to survive. So we get to see a vampire in a different light with different emotions than the usual vampire film where they're usually just desperate to kill and feed. This is much more of a chilled film. There isn't loads going on because it is just more character focused. You do quickly become attached to them. My second to last pick is Crimson Peak. Crimson Peak is a haunting story of a woman who ignores her father's warning and marries a man that ends up having some dark secrets. This film is kind of wild. It definitely took a turn that I wasn't expecting. I actually only watched this for the first time a few years ago, and luckily I hadn't had it spoiled for me, although it had been out for a little while. It was a journey. One thing that just really stands out in this film is how beautiful it is shot, how beautiful the scenery is. It's very gothic and dark. If you are wanting a more gothic romance, then this is definitely one that I would recommend. Lastly is one of my all-time favorite films, and that is The Fly. In The Fly, we follow a scientist who has just made an incredible breakthrough with teleportation. He tries out this teleportation device on himself, but unknowingly a fly also ends up going into the teleportation unit with him. So when his body teleports, it's not just his body's cells and DNA, it is also the flies that teleport with him and end up combining with his. After this teleportation trial, he starts to notice changes within his body and he is slowly becoming more and more like a fly. This is a film that will make you feel so much. It's done so well and the body horror is incredible, which isn't unexpected because this is directed by David Cronenberg. The transformation in this film is definitely one that has inspired so many horror films after it. Even the film Wolfman that has just recently come out, Lee Winnell, the director, confirmed that he wanted the transformation of the Wolfman to be similar to David Cronenberg's The Fly. This is definitely my favourite horror romance and I would just recommend it to everyone. If you are going to watch any on this list, then definitely watch this one. So there are my 10 Valentine's Day horror films. If you have any suggestions, then please leave them in the comments. If there are some that you think may be obvious that I've missed, then they may be in my anti-Valentine's Day video. I hope that you have a good February and that the winter months aren't dragging on too long for you. We are now in the stretch for spring. Hopefully it will come around before we know it, and I'll see you again in another one soon.